put him over. I did just that. Yeah.
Members of Parliament, support staff, radio listeners, TV viewers, those following this meeting via social media, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to this public meeting of Parliament. This is public meeting number 11 for today, Tuesday, April 29th. At this time, I want to give a special welcome to the Honorable Minister of Finance, Ms. Marinka Gums, and her support staff. We have established a quorum of 11 members. Please stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. As we stood for a moment of silence, I wish to express heartfelt words of empathy, words of strength to the people and government of Guyana. With what that country is presently facing, I wish them much strength and wisdom as they face this challenge during these days, to such an extent that flights destined for Guyana had to be diverted until, and I hope in the meantime it has, things would cool down in that country. So our thoughts and prayers are with the people and government of Guyana. In terms of notices from members of Parliament, I have received notice of absence from the members Lewis, Doran, Otley and Kotai. Are there any notifications from members of Parliament here present? We do have one to start with, and that is MP Waver, who wishes to have the floor for notifications. MP Waver, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to the griffier, the Honourable Minister, support staff, and my honourable colleagues. I would just like to take this time to congratulate and wish my parents actually a happy 50th wedding anniversary today, Mr. Lewis and Amanda Waver, and wish them 50 more, hopefully. We'll see. So, yeah, I just want to take the time to publicly congratulate them. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Waver. I join you in extending words of congratulations and best wishes on this their anniversary. Your parents, Mr. and Mrs. Louis Waver. Are there any other notifications from the floor? That is not the case, and thus we can go over to the agenda points for this meeting, which are 1, incoming document, and 2 is a draft national ordinance that contains rules regarding a basic payment account for consumers. This is the National Ordinance Basic Payment Account, Landsverordening, basisbetaalrekening, and it is number 174 of the parliamentary year 23-24 here in the records of Parliament. The document itself, as it was received from government, is IS 292 of the parliamentary year 23-24, and it is dated December the 20th of 2023. Going over to the first agenda point, members of Parliament, you have received the list of incoming documents and, as is customary, the proposals for further handling. These are the IS documents numbers 481 through 797 for the parliamentary year 2024-2025. I just would like to propose one change to the handling of these documents, and that is for the number 169, IS 169 in the document of incoming, in the list of incoming documents. And the proposal was to send it to the Central Committee. However, here I would want to propose an adjustment to the handling, and that this be sent, so IS 649 be sent to the Committee for Petitions. That's the proposal. And are there any other comments or proposals on the list of incoming documents as presented? That not being the case, so the list and the proposals for handling are hereby approved. We go over to the agenda point number 2. And this, the formal name, is de Ontwerplandsverordening, houdende regels met betrekking tot een basisbetaalrekening voor consumenten. De Landsverordening basisbetaalrekening van het Zittingsjaar 2023-2024, nummer 174, ingekomen onder nummer 292 van het parlementaire jaar 23-24, gedateerd 20 december 2023. As I mentioned during the introduction, this is a draft national ordinance containing rules regarding a basic payment account for all consumers. And I mentioned the numbers. It is National Ordinance number 174 and incoming document number 292 of the parliamentary year 23-24. This document, this proposed draft national ordinance from the government, was received, as I mentioned, on December the 20th of 2023. We had a Central Committee meeting on the topic on January the 4th of 2024, and members of Parliament posed their questions on this draft national ordinance. Following that, a report was made on the deliberations of the Central Committee meeting, sent to government, and the government responded with a so-called nota naar aanleiding van het verslag, note following the final report. That note, so in other words, the answers as recorded by the government were received on February the 27th of 2025. This is IS document, members of parliament, number 652 of the parliamentary year 24-25. And of course, these are all available on Teams, and that is Parliament's general team. So I would now, after that brief introduction to what this draft national ordinance is about, I want to give the floor to the Minister of Finance, Ms. Marinka Gums, for her opening remarks and presentation on the proposed draft national ordinance as we have received it from the government of St. Martin. Minister of Finance, you have the floor.
Honorable Chair Lady of Parliament, honorable members of Parliament, griffier, support staff, members of the media, radio listeners, and all others under the sound of my voice, good afternoon and blessed day. It is both an honor and a privilege to stand before you today to present the national ordinance on the basic payment account. This ordinance represents an important step forward improving financial inclusion and protecting the rights of every resident of St. Martin to access basic banking services. The objective of this legislation is to enhance access to digital payment services for natural persons. Specifically, it aims to ensure that individuals who may not qualify for a standard payment account are still able to conduct essential cashless payment transactions, thereby promoting greater financial inclusion and participation in our increasingly digital economy. I would like to take a moment to clarify that this specific ordinance applies exclusively to natural persons, not to businesses. The focus of this legislation is on ensuring that individuals with a vested interest in St. Martin, particularly those who may currently face barriers to accessing financial services, are able to open and maintain a basic payment account. The objective here is to promote financial inclusion for all residents by providing access to essential banking services, something we consider a basic right in today's society. I look forward to sharing with you the key objectives, rationale, and anticipated impact of this legislation, as well as answering any questions you may have. The agenda for today's meeting, you will see the presentation will guide you through the following key points related to the draft national ordinance on the basic payment account. The trajectory is summary of the legislative journey of the ordinance, key features, what the ordinance aims to regulate and provide, limitations, what falls outside the scope of this legislation, application conditions, who qualifies and how, termination conditions, under what circumstances the banking relationship can be ended, costs and fees, rules and expectations around charges, protection and complaints, safeguards for consumers and how issues can be addressed, evaluation, how the ordinance will be reviewed and assessed moving forward, and 10, closing. Open floor for questions and discussion. Honorable Chair, members of Parliament, the draft national ordinance on the basic payment account is rooted in the broader goal of promoting financial inclusion for all residents, and I repeat, residents of St. Martin. Ensuring access to essential banking services is not only a matter of convenience, but a critical component of participating in a modern digital economy. This ordinance aligns with key priorities outlined in the governing accord, which emphasizes the importance of accessible, transparent, and fair financial services for individuals. The development of the draft national ordinance on the basic payment account is grounded in 3 key elements: a parliamentary motion, the strategic vision of our central bank, and evidence-based research on financial access in our community. The motion. I would like to provide some context regarding motion number 8, which was adopted on January 21st, 2022, and submitted by the then Member of Parliament, Mr. Rolando Bryson, and approved by the then Members of Parliament. The motion outlined 4 key principles. 1, the right to have a basic bank account opened within a reasonable time. 2, rules by which the banking relationship can be terminated. 3, rules for publication, transparency, and limitations related to bank charges. And 4, the creation of a Consumer Banking Protection Bureau. The motion resolved that the Minister of Finance, as the shareholder representative of the Central Bank of Curaçao and St. Martin, instruct the CBCS to prioritize the vetting and/or drafting of consumer banking protection legislation, ensuring that the 4 key principles mentioned above are addressed. The CBCS was requested to submit a draft within 90 days of receiving the instruction. While I fully acknowledge the intent and importance of this motion, I would like to clarify that the current national ordinance on the basic payment account specifically addresses only the first 2 points of the motion: the right to a bank account and the rules governing termination of the banking relationship. As for the remaining 2 points regarding bank charges and the creation of a Consumer Banking Protection Bureau, we have reached out to the Central Bank of Curaçao and St. Martin for an update on the status of these matters. With regard to the 3rd point in motion number 8, which concerns the regulation of bank charges, transparency, and publication requirements, I would like to note the following. These matters are being addressed through 2 draft legislations: the National Ordinance on Oversight and the National Ordinance on Financial Market Infrastructure, FMI. These laws will enable the central bank to issue binding regulation, AVVs, on topics such as bank fees, transparency, and reporting standards. Both drafts have been submitted to the Council of Advice, and the further report, or the NADA reporting, are currently being finalized. Once completed, these will be forwarded to Parliament for consideration. These legislative efforts collectively support the motion's objectives and reflect our commitment to strengthening oversight and transparency in the financial sector. This clarification is important to manage expectations around what this ordinance intends to regulate and what remains under discussion or development. With regard to the Consumer Banking Protection Bureau, no steps have been taken to date to initiate the drafting of the related legislation. I will be engaging in discussions with the central bank to explore how we can move this process forward and ensure that the necessary legislative framework is developed. Strategic plan. On February 17, 2022, the Central Bank presented its Strategic Plan 2022-2025 to the Council of Ministers. One of the central goals in this plan is to ensure that payment systems are accessible to all. This ordinance is a direct reflection of that goal and supports our broader national objectives around inclusion, transparency, and economic empowerment.
Minister Gums, with your indulgence, I see MP Irian having an interruption. MP Irian, you want to make, well, clearly you want to make it during the minister's presentation, but could you please keep it brief so that the minister could have a certain flow in the presentation, then we can get into the discussion. MP Irian.
Yes, yes, Madam Chair. I'll keep it brief. Good afternoon, all. Minister, just for clarity, based on the presentation and the slide just now, it gives the interpretation that this legislation was actually initiated because of that motion, or was drafted because of that motion. So I want some clarity on that. Is that the case? Otherwise, why is that slide then relevant?
Thank you, MP Irian, for that interruption. And I'll give the minister just a moment to respond to that interruption question. Minister, you may continue.
Thank you for your question or for clarity, MP Arian. To clarify, that slide was simply to indicate a timeline basis. It's not based on the motion necessarily, but it's to indicate the timeline process of what I met when I came in and will be handling here today.
MP Irian, for
Thank
your
you.
interruption.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And just for clarity, because we had this discussion already when I was here and brought the CC in terms of the legislation and the timeline. And a question I believe even came for you, Madam Chair, in terms of the process, because we had MP Bryson that actually brought a legislation regarding the banking law. So I've also put it in the MP's chat also, so the information from the central bank itself. So I would like the minister to clarify this actually, because the central bank in their answers states that this legislation started in 2021 and your legal advisor is also part of that email transaction. And in that email also they make it very clear, because there's a very direct question, does this legislation have anything to do with MP Bryson? And they said no. So I've also sent it to the Parliament chat. So I'd like some clarity on that. So they also said that it started in January of 2021 by the central bank. And they also state why it was started. So then your presentation does not align with the actual timeline and the legal procedure and trajectory of the central bank itself. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Irian. I get a while the minister is preparing for the answer, I believe, to the interruption by MP Irian, the references in this document also include the request by former MP Bryson, who had drafted not a complete draft national ordinance, but definitely a proposal to deal with a basic payment account, with the request that the government at the time / the Minister of Finance put those parts in that draft to the Central Bank of Curaçao and St. Martin and ask them to propose to assist the government with the preparation of a basic bank account legislation. That is evident from the documentation that we have received, and I believe there was even a presentation at the time by the former MP regarding the proposal for a basic bank account. But let the minister explain government's side of this timeline to come to the proposal that we have before us now. Minister, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for clarity, I think it's important to say the following. I understand MP Irian's position on what the central bank indicated. I also understand what the former MP Bryson, as this was an important topic for him, brought to the floor of Parliament as well. Truth of the matter is, we are here today, and I know MP Irian, this is a matter that is of very much importance to you personally, Madam Chair, through you. And so whether it's Central Bank doing, former MP Bryson bringing this to the floor because of importance. Fact of the matter is, this matter is of serious importance, and both you and I know that there are persons within this community that don't have the proper needs for just a simple basic bank account, and that's what we're here today to discuss.
Minister, you may continue.
Strategic plan. On February 17, 2022, the Central Bank presented its Strategic Plan 2022 to 2025 to the Council of Ministers. One of the central goals in this plan is to ensure that payment systems are accessible to all. This ordinance is a direct reflection of the goal and supports our broader national objectives around inclusion, transparency, and economic empowerment. Research findings. The need for legislative action is further reinforced by research. In 2020, a study by the Central Bank and the Central Bureau of Statistics of Curaçao titled Households Financial Affairs 2020 found that over 12% of the population in Curaçao did not have access to a checking account. A follow-up study conducted in 2021 in St. Martin titled A Glance into St. Martin's Payment Behavior and Financial Matters revealed an even more concerning figure. Approximately 17% of the population did not have a checking account. Key barriers identified in the study included low household income, high costs associated with account maintenance, lack of trust in the banking sector, financial products not suited to consumer goods or needs, and limited financial literacy. These findings underscore the urgency for policy intervention. The draft ordinance before you today is a direct response to these realities and is intended to promote financial inclusion and ensure that no one is left behind as we transition toward a more digital economy. Trajectory of the draft national ordinance on the basic payments account. Honorable Chair, Lady, and honorable members of Parliament, allow me to briefly outline the trajectory of the draft national ordinance on the basic payment account. On March 1st, 2022, the Central Bank of Curaçao and St. Martin submitted the first draft of this ordinance, along with a draft containing general binding regulations. These documents aim to improve access to basic digital banking services for all residents, particularly those currently without access. The submission included feedback from representative organizations and supporting research, which were attached to the explanatory memorandum as annexes. The draft was subsequently forwarded to the Council of Advice on May 25, 2023, and their advice was issued on August 1st, 2023. Following this, the Ministry of Finance, together with the Central Bank, reviewed and updated the draft ordinance and explanatory memorandum. These changes were incorporated into the further report, or the NADA report, which was approved by the Council of Ministers and submitted to Parliament. The draft ordinance was handled in the Central Committee meeting of Parliament on January 4th, 2024. I would like to note for the record that this meeting took place prior to my appointment as Minister of Finance, and I was therefore not present at that discussion. Parliament's final report on the draft ordinance was submitted on July 10th, 2024, and the government's formal response, the note following the final report, was sent to Parliament on February 27th, 2025. Today, I am here in this public meeting to discuss this ordinance with you because I consider this a crucial piece of legislation. It reflects our commitment by ensuring that every resident of St. Martin has access to a bank account, a basic necessity in our increasingly digital economy. As we advance toward the digitalization of payments and public services, we must ensure that no one is left behind. This ordinance is a key step toward financial inclusion for all. Key features of the draft ordinance on the basic payment account. Madam Chair, members of Parliament, this draft legislation is designed to ensure that natural persons who qualify can have access to a basic payment account in the local currency of St. Martin. Such an account allows for cashless transactions and provides access to a number of essential financial services. This ordinance is particularly aimed at those living in St. Martin who, for various reasons, do not currently have access to a checking account despite having a vested interest in the country. This law intends to remove barriers and create a pathway to inclusion for these individuals. Preventing exclusion. As more institutions shift away from accepting cash, access to cashless payment services is becoming a basic need. To prevent financial and social exclusion, it is essential that individuals can participate in this transition, and having at least a basic bank account is a starting point. Legally guaranteed access. By legally anchoring the right to access a basic payment account, the government of St. Martin ensures that every resident with a vested interest in the country has the right to open such an account, a step toward greater financial fairness and inclusion. Limitations of the basic payment account. It is important to note that a basic payment account differs from a regular checking account and comes with specific limitations as outlined in the draft ordinance. The account may not be overdrawn. Transfers are limited to and from St. Martin and Curacao only. A maximum of 3,000 Caribbean guilders may be deposited per month. One cannot hold more than one payment or basic payment account. The account must be in one person's name only. Joint accounts are not permitted. Importantly, when applying for a basic payment account, the consumer's age, income level, employment status, credit history, or bankruptcy status shall not be a basis for rejection. This ensures broad access regardless of financial background. Based on consultations with the Bankers Association, the maximum time allotted for a bank to open a basic bank account has been set at 10 business days. Application conditions, vested interest requirements. To apply, the individual must demonstrate a vested interest in St. Martin. Specifically, this applies to persons legally residing on the island, those involved in financial transactions with the government, such as making or receiving payments. This condition ensures that access to basic financial services is aligned with the principle of transparency and traceability in the financial sector. Therefore, individuals who do not legally reside on the island and have no vested interest will not qualify for a basic payment account. To give you more context, I would like to read a section from the Memorie van Toelichting that explains the idea of vested interest more clearly. In general, someone has a real or vested interest if they have a clear connection to St. Martin. This is assumed, for example, if the person is a legal resident of the country. Other examples of vested interest include having the Dutch nationality, working, interning, or studying in St. Martin, or even being a digital nomad who needs a local account to handle everyday expenses. There's also a vested interest if someone lives abroad but owns property here that generates rental income and requires tax payments. People whose work or resident permits are still being processed, or those temporarily settling in the country may also qualify. These are just examples. They are not strict rules. In short, any situation where a person has financial dealings with the government, like paying taxes or fees, means they have a vested interest. However, as previously mentioned, residents are automatically classified as having a vested interest. All other scenarios are at the discretion of the financial institution. Required documentation. According to Article 2, Paragraph 6 of the draft ordinance, the central bank will issue general binding regulations specifying what documents applicants must submit, and defining the maximum allowable monthly transfer. At minimum, the following must be submitted: a valid form of identification and personal details. 2, contact information for the applicant. 3, a transaction profile, which provides insight into how the account will be used. Monthly deposit limit. As mentioned, a key condition of this basic payment account is that consumers may deposit no more than 3,000 Caribbean guilders per month into the account. Please bear in mind, this is not a savings account and is not subject to interest being accumulated. Limitations on service requirements. Finally, it is important to clarify that payment service providers are not obligated to offer services under the basic payment account that they do not offer to holders of regular accounts. This ensures fairness without placing undue burden on service providers. Termination conditions. Madam Chair and members of Parliament, according to Article 5 of the draft National Ordinance on the Basic Payment Account, a payment service provider may unilaterally terminate this agreement with account holder under specific conditions, and these include: if no transactions have taken place on the account for more than 24 consecutive months. 2, if the account holder already has a payment account with another local payment service provider. 3, if the account holder has been irrevocably convicted of a criminal offense as specified in the ordinance. 4, if false or incomplete information was provided to obtain the account. 5, if the account was deliberately used to commit criminal offenses. In all cases, the intention to terminate must be communicated to the account holder. The consumer has the right to file a complaint with both the commercial bank and the central bank, and may also seek recourse through the civil court, as this concerns rights protected under private consumer law. Costs and fees. While payment service providers may charge reasonable fees for maintaining a basic payment account, the law stipulates that these fees must be lower than those of a standard checking account, given that the basic account offers fewer services. This provision ensures that the account remains affordable, particularly for individuals with limited financial means, and supports the overall goal of financial inclusion. Protection and complaints. Although this ordinance does not establish a Consumer Banking Protection Bureau, it does provide for a clear complaints process. If a consumer feels that they have not been granted access to a basic payment account, or that their rights have not been respected, they may: 1, file a complaint with the relative commercial bank; 2, contact the central bank; 3, and if needed, pursue legal action in the civil court. And this ordinance falls under private consumer law. These legal protections are enforceable. The explanatory memorandum further elaborates on the rights of consumers and the safeguards in place. Evaluation. Finally, Madam Chair, in accordance with the ordinance, the Minister of Finance will present a formal evaluation report to Parliament within 5 years of the law's entry into force. This report will assess: 1, the effectiveness of the ordinance; 2, whether its objectives and intended effects have been achieved. This ensures that the law remains practical, efficient, and responsive to the needs of the people it aims to serve. In closing, Madam Chair and honorable members of Parliament, I want to thank you for your attention and for taking the time to engage with this important piece of legislation. I hope that the information provided today has been clear and informative, and that it has given you a full understanding of the objectives, scope, and implications of the draft National Ordinance on the Basic Payment Account. While many of us in this room may already have access to a bank account, we must recognize that this is not the reality for everyone. There are still residents, including those who are most vulnerable, and even St. Martiners returning home, who may not yet have a job or a stable income, who struggle to open a bank account. And as a result, are excluded from fully participating in our economy. As we move toward a cashless economy, it is important to recognize that while we still have a way to go, this is already a reality in many parts of the world. In order to fully or successfully transition, it is essential that everyone has access to opening a bank account. For example, in Curacao, cash payments are no longer accepted at the receiver's office, and checks have already been phased out here. In the future, the use of cash will further decline. However, it is critical that the necessary systems are in place to support this transition, ensuring that no one is left behind and that we continue to strengthen and modernize our economy. As Minister of Finance, I fully support this legislation as I believe it is a critical step toward ensuring greater financial inclusion for all of our residents. Access to basic financial services is a necessity in today's society, and this ordinance lays the foundation for a more inclusive and equitable financial system in St. Martin. Honourable Members of Parliament, I look forward to your questions, comments, and contributions and remain open to any clarifications you may need. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister of Finance, Minister Gums, for the introduction and presentation of the draft National Ordinance Basic Payment Account, commonly known as the basisbetaalrekening legislation. Members of Parliament, I will in a moment adjourn for just 5 minutes, allowing the members of Parliament, of course, we are in a public meeting and thus your desire to speak has to be indicated on the speakers list. I just want to remind you that the allotted speaking time is 20 minutes in the first round and 10 minutes in the second round. So I'll just adjourn for, in fact, not 5, just 3 minutes. So by 4:05, we will resume. Meeting adjourned until 4:05. Members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We had a brief adjournment after the Minister of Finance, Minister Marinka Gums, presented the government's draft for a basic payment account, the draft national ordinance basisbetaalrekening. And so now, after the introduction and presentation by the Minister of this law, we are now going over to the questions by members of Parliament. As I reminded the members before, we had a few minutes adjournment. The speaking time for the members of Parliament in this round is 20 minutes. According to the list of speakers, I start with MP Dimar Labega. MP Labega, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to the griffier, my fellow colleagues, the Minister of Finance and the support staff, and everyone home listening. Through you, Madam Chair, I'd like to thank the Minister of Finance for the presentation. Pretty straightforward. A much needed legislation in 2025 to think that, it's difficult for individuals to get access to bank accounts. Two questions in reference to the presentation. I took note that the bank account will only be accessible in St. Martin and Curacao. Would this mean that if you travel internationally, debit card will not work in the ATMs? If so, I do believe that this should be looked into. Even though it's a basic bank account, when you travel, you're definitely going to need to have access to your funds. My second question is also pertaining to international purchases, online shopping, etc. I see some head shaking, so I guess that means no. If not, I do believe this needs to be looked into. A lot of items are sourced online, etc. You could not have a formal job, but you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to find your way through different online platforms to purchase services, goods, etc. So I'd like a clarification on that, and that'll be all. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Labega, for your questions on the topic of a basic payment account, as we're handling that law right now. And we do have another MP up to speak at this time, and I invite MP Lacruz to take the floor. MP Lacruz, you have the floor.
A blessed afternoon, Madam Chair, Lady Griffier, Minister and her support staff, my fellow colleagues, those in the Tribune, all those watching via social media and on our YouTube page. Madam Chair, Lady, I took some good time going over what was presented to us today, and I have a couple questions. I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to ask only a couple because I got a couple answers in the presentation, and MP Artwell Arian also enlightened me on some of the questions that I had. So I'm going to ask those that I did not get an answer from him from. First one is, what is the percentage of local residents, so residents, that do not have a bank account? What type of jobs do these locals have? And it's a sum up to why I'm asking this question. What type of jobs do they have? And it comes back to the amount that is allowed on this account, 3,000 guilders, which is roughly $1,666.67. That doesn't seem to be a great amount per month that could be actually stored on the bank. So the question would also be, how was this amount determined and why that amount? Then Article 3.3 speaks of a system, and I I know the system exists in the Netherlands. It's the BKR, where you would register all loans, and banks have communication with each other. Is that already the case here, or is this something new that will be introduced? That is another question. And then Article 2.5, de betaaldienstverlening biedt de diensten, bedoeld in de tweede lid, kosteloos of tegen een redelijk vergoeding aan. That word, redelijk, I have a problem with it. Because what is redelijk? This weekend I went to a ATM machine, and a notice popped up that it would cost $10 to take off money off of that machine. So that word redelijk, and then I don't know how exactly, if the minister has influence or central bank, or how does that work, but I'm afraid of those types of words because it leaves it extremely open to be able to charge whatever and however they want it. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, MP La Cruz. I see MP Roseberg is making her way to the speakers list and indicating her desire to speak on the topic. So in a minute, I will give MP Roseberg the floor. MP Roseberg, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Blessed afternoon to the Minister of Finance and the support staff. Also blessed afternoon to my colleagues present here today and to the ones that are tuned in online or present here in the tribune. First of all, thank you for your presentation, through you, Madam Chair. What I would like to bring forward in regards to this legislation is the following. I understood that it will be a basic right for the people of St. Martin, the consumers, to have a bank account. But what I'm currently seeing is that the banks can still deny persons to have a bank account. So how does the legislation in connection to the bank being entitled to decide, okay, I want you as a client or not, how does that match with each other? And what if, for example, a relationship with one bank was ended and a consumer would like to have a relationship by another bank, and that bank is not granting the consumer to have a bank account? How will the government guarantee that everyone will be able to have that bank account? And then especially in connection with the laws in regards to the banks being able to decide, okay, I want you or I want you not. So that's a very important question that I would like to have answered, so that the consumer and also the banks are aware of how that will work once this legislation is in full effect. Other than that, I currently am aware of the situation that persons that have been convicted, their bank account is being closed off, and they are having difficulties opening up a bank account because the bank relationship with one bank is ended, and then they're looking to bank with the other bank, but that information is passed on, and then they find themselves in a position that they cannot open a bank account. I read the articles that are mentioned in the law, money laundering, for example, bedrog en valsheid in geschrift. But I'm seeing that currently, at least, that persons that are not convicted of those facts are still being penalized, that the accounts will be closed. So how will government play a role making sure that that does not take place? And also, is there an alternative for those that have been convicted? Because I saw that the law states for the past 8 years. So if you have been convicted, if you have done something wrong, it can be falsifying a document, or finding yourself in a position that you find yourself in the hands of the law, and it is one of those 3 articles. That would mean that for the coming 8 years, you cannot open a bank account. So how will you function in the society if that is the case? So is there other alternative for those people? Other than that, it's mentioning every resident will be able to have an account. What I would like to know, the ones that are currently, and I know it's not for business owners, but I just would like to have the question answered. For the business owners that are currently not able to open a business account, are those business owners able to open a consumer account under that amount? And then my last question for now is, I saw in the presentation the consumer protection legislation, and I'm creating a consumer protection bureau. If it's similar as in the Netherlands, consumenten, I would assume, if that's correct. And if that is the case, is the ministry also working with the TEAT ministry in regards to that matter? Because I do believe that to have a, how do you call that, an autoriteit that will oversee the consumer protection, I do believe that that should be done together with the Ministry of TEAT. So before going into that topic, I would like to know what the position of the Ministry of Finance is in regards to that, and then I can go a little deeper into that matter. And I think those are my questions for now. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Roosberg, for your questions. The next member of Parliament up to speak is MP Wever. MP Wever, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief. Basically, this law deals with those that don't have a bank account, so it's the basic bank account. But as we know in life, we try to always, when we start somewhere, we try to grow, right? So what happens then if I now get promotions in the job, and now I end up making more than the 3,000 guilders? That's allotted. Will me having a basic bank account make it easier now to transition into a regular bank account? So I'm looking ahead at that. Or does then I don't qualify no more for the 3,000, and now I have to reapply for a whole new bank account? You know, or can we transition from a basic to the regular bank account? So that's just my question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Wever. I now see that MP York is requesting the floor. MP York, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Griffier, Minister and support staff, esteemed colleagues, and the viewing public. Thank you, Minister, for the presentation. I only have 2 questions pertaining to that. In the presentation, the Minister made note of 17% of the population that currently don't have a bank account, and basically that the law will be permitting them to have one. One of the things that plague current banking users, people that have bank accounts, would be the extensive lines at the banks and the verwerkingstijd when it comes to that. So basically 17% more people getting bank accounts would mean potentially an increase in whichever line at whichever bank, or basically people visiting the banks, right? So my question would be, well, before I get to the question, one of the main things that are used to to circumvent people actually visiting the bank would be online banking. So my question would be, does this law have any provisions in it that would make online banking a right and not a privilege? Because if I understand correctly, right now it would seem as if the law as currently written, it's more a privilege than a right. So my question is it more a right than a privilege? And moving on from that, I know that this legislation is more for personal banking, and I would like to just look briefly at the more broader sense of banking in general. This is more for a right to a bank account for personal users. But if you look a little further when it comes to business, does it have any provisions, or is the ministry working on anything when it comes to rights for businesses? Because right now, the government would issue a business license, but that does not mean that the business is allowed to get a bank account. Because right now you have several businesses on the island without bank accounts. Everything from casinos, lottery booths, you name it. And because of the CATF international laws and other laws, that makes it very stringent on Caribbean countries. I would like to know what is being done when it pertains to rights for a bank account for businesses. Because at the end of the day, these businesses turn over a lot of funds, a lot of cash. And when you look at the regulatory red flags, when it comes to anti-money laundering, the AML, etc., right now there's nothing to oversee those funds. So adding things like, if you were to just look forward, adding things like a casino that was just added to the list, or moving forward when it comes to the potential marijuana legislation, and you have marijuana dispensaries, does the law that we currently have, does that allow these businesses, current businesses, and businesses moving, future businesses, to have a bank account, to avoid St. Martin being even more on the blacklist when it comes to anti-money laundering? Because a lot of these stringent laws is because of our place on that list, and I would like to know what is being done to avoid St. Martin rising on that list. And that would be it for my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, MP York. We continue with the members of Parliament addressing the matter as presented in this draft law. And the next MP up to speak is MP Irian. MP Irian, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Thank you. Your colleagues, Honorable Minister of Finance and her support staff. Bear with me a little bit because I'm a little under the weather. As many of you may know, during my tenure as Minister of Finance, we worked very closely with the Central Bank to bring the original legislation to Parliament. And the legislation, as the Minister mentioned, and I'm happy that the Minister continued the process, focus on ensuring that everyone in St. Martin could have access to a basic bank account, financial services, especially as our society becomes even more digital. What I am a bit disappointed in is with how we've handled this legislation in terms of timeline. The legislation has been here since the last quarter of 2023, so we're almost a year and a half removed from that, and we have basically taken away the opportunity for the same persons that MPs are saying that we are concerned about. We have taken away the opportunity to be able for them to open their bank accounts. So I'm hoping that, yes, we are going to adjourn the meeting today, but like many other meetings that we have called or have not come back to, I hope that this is not one of them that we do not finalize in a very short period. Now, nearly 2 years later, as a member of Parliament, I also find myself in a crucial position to take the legislation even further, to strengthen it and future-proof the vision that we had at that point in time, and address not all of the gaps, but address some of the gaps that the people of St. Martin continue to experience today. And with that being said, I have submitted an amendment to the Parliament addressing some of these concerns. And the amendment will address key aspects, complaints, for example. I even had my colleague let me know that one of the banks in St. Martin, for example, that to even transfer funds, you still have to go in person physically to do that. And in today's age and the time of going more digital in the AI and so forth, that we're going to take this law and now make it more digital. So some gaps in the law that sits before us, it doesn't speak of being a digital law. So the amendment that has been brought forward takes the current legislation and brings it into the digital world. It also addresses areas, for example, where some banks, if you want to open a new bank account, you have to physically go there in person. If you want to ask for an interest letter, you have to physically go there in person. If you want to ask for a new banking card, you have to physically go there in person. So with this amendment that I'm bringing forward, it ensures that the banks now have to, everything that you can do in the physical form, you now have to present in the digital form as well. When I was studying in the Netherlands, that's over a decade ago, or before I returned home actually, I didn't even get to see the inside of my bank. I have no idea what a teller looks like because I could have done every single thing at home. I had no idea what the bank employees look like. In addition to that, continuing to make sure that we actually elevate ourselves in society and we see the complaints of entrepreneurs, we see the complaints of the individuals in society regarding accessibility. This amendment also addresses the fact that we have limited access to payment services like PayPal or Stripe, and this amendment now would ensure that the banks with the central bank at the very least, create an e-payment system that allows all of us to be able to have access to similar financial services. So whether it's opening a basic bank account, requesting a new bank card, receiving an interest letter, as I mentioned before, or just managing your account, it should not require multiple trips to the bank. In St. Martin, the digital divide remains real, as I mentioned before. Not everyone has easy access to international platforms. For many small businesses, gig workers, as the minister mentioned, digital nomads, and everyday citizens, the inability to easily use digital banking tools is a real barrier and economic opportunity. And in this, I believe we'll continue to modernize our economy. This is about giving everyone not just a privilege for the few chance to fully participate in today's digital financial world. A mother working 2 jobs shouldn't have to take a day off to go and apply for a bank card. A young entrepreneur shouldn't have to, should be able to send payments and also receive payments for their business easily and securely. And a retiree should be able to check their balance online without having to feel lost or excluded. Even this week alone, many persons within the Carnival village, they say, with all these lines that we have, even the boot holders were complaining, hey, if we had some type of system where we could just tap and go, we'll be able to provide a better service to our clients. So I'm hoping that when that time comes, that the members of Parliament can see themselves within the amendment and also support. And I, again, thank the Minister for coming back today and presenting this law, and I hope that we can finalize it as soon as possible. Thank you. And I would also like to, sorry, Madam Chair, thank the SG for his guidance. And I realize drafting a law is a lot more complicated than many may think. So I also want to thank the SG for his guidance. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Irian, for your comments. And the next MP up to speak is MP De Wever. MP De Wever, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. My question is just, I believe some of the MPs before touched on it a little bit, but it's just to understand the logic basically, because this is a cooperation basically with banks to make it more accessible for individuals to have it. But what I don't understand is why there's a maximum deposit of 3,000 guilders, because normally the way banks work are, they make their money through administration fees. Those administration fees are all the little fees that you see on your account. For example, I'll give you one from my account, which is if I have to transfer money to a colleague in a different bank or to someone in a different bank, I pay 6 guilders and 27 cents. If I have to transfer money to someone from my same bank, I pay 1 guilder. And, oh, sorry, this is if I'm making a payment. So if I'm paying GB or Telem, I have to pay 1 guilder. And then I have a monthly maintenance fee of 15 guilders. So the reason that I'm bringing that up is that banks make their money through the fees that they charge us for having an account at their bank. So having a maximum threshold of 3,000 doesn't really make sense. What I'm used to is most banks, actually not in St. Martin, in the rest of the world, I'm used to most banks having a minimum, that way that if you keep your minimum, they don't charge you excessive fees. So, you know, the reason I'm questioning this is because by having a limit onto how much people can have on that account, you're still basically not, you know, getting people used to the idea of using this account for transactions, that we're trying to shift people to go over to more digital ways of paying, just like the previous MP was talking about, MP Arian, about making things more digital, having more access. As in, for most of us on the island going into the village, indeed, we could actually use our card swipe, or maybe we get to the time in our life here where we catch up with the rest of the world and we can actually just take the phone and then tap it the way that you do it in other places. But it really didn't make much sense, and I would just like an explanation on that, please, because while the bank account is referring to a maximum threshold on it, it also doesn't explain the bank fees. And that's why I specifically went over my personal bank fees on my account so that I can know what to expect from a basic bank account, because even though we're providing a service to persons that don't have it, or the 17% that don't have it, if they're still going to be getting the same fees like me, then, you know, they might just continue to keep their money under their mattress. Thanks very much, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, MP De Wever, for those comments and questions. The next MP up to speak is MP Myers. MP Myers, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, to you and my colleagues here in Parliament, to the Honourable Minister and the support staff, those of you listening via social media. Good afternoon. I'm going to be very brief. I just want to commend the Minister of Finance for following through on this legislation. I believe it's something that's very important. This is a direct consequence of globalization. St. Martin is but a minor player in this whole global financial scheme, and as such, these are the consequences that we are faced with as a little island nation, where when certain rules are put in place, we see the effects of it. We sometimes refer to our Constitution as the Bible of how our country should run. And Article 16 of our Constitution is the article on discrimination, and saying that, you know, you cannot discriminate. And then it begs to differ. It begs to ask the question: can the banks actually discriminate for whatever reason and not give an individual who is a citizen of the country a bank account? So I think it's a great initiative. I look forward to further debate on it, and maybe we as members of Parliament could, if we have some input that we can put in. One of the things is, again, from a senior citizen's perspective as well, the banks do not give loans to anyone that is over the retired age. That is a form of discrimination as well, because you are discriminating against a person who is not of the age, because of their age, while because you are 65, while the likelihood of you passing away is higher than someone who's 23, it does not totally eliminate the person who's 23 from passing away. So in essence, that's a form of discrimination. So these are the things that we should, check into. Some of my colleagues, MP Artwell, Arian made a very good point as far as the digitalization. One of the things I'm very cautious with when it comes to cashless societies. I feel that gives institutions too much control over your spending. And imagine a digital world where anything that you spend is documented and controlled by whom and for what reason. So I think this is something that we must, tread on very, very, this is the way the world that's going, but if great countries, big countries, like the United States and even Europe are testing it in small areas and not on a broad scale, it's something that we will have to consider as well. So once again, Minister, thank you, and congratulations on this initiative.
Thank you, MP Myers. The next MP up to speak is MP Veronica Janssen-Webster. MP Janssen, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to the colleagues, the minister, support staff, and everyone listening in today. I want to continue on what MP Myers spoke about with the whole cashless economy and cashless banking system. It was mentioned earlier by another MP, I think it was MP Arian, about the village, and the village is not cashless. But what you do see is, because it seems as if the banks want us to go cashless, a lot has changed in the amounts that we're allowed, the minimum amounts that we're allowed to take even from the ATM. So what happens now is that, to me, people are not taking into account, especially if you are talking about accounts here with maximum deposits of $3,000. If you have to pay rent, GBE, top up your phone, and then you pay whatever else for your children, etc. Your discretionary income, what's left back, is not all that much. And people were able to go to the ATM and take out a $20 so that they could go to the village with a $20. Now you have to go to the village, you must go with a $50. And that is putting certain people in our society in a position because we assume they have a $50. And I can say that from experience, that sometimes in the past, I didn't have a $50 on my account. I had a $20 on my account, and I wanted that $20, and you cannot take it out. And I've been to the ATM up to even last night on my way to the village, where people were there who could not take out any money because they needed to take out that minimum. So those are things that when we look at even this, we need to look at the bigger picture of where we're going, which I understand is cashless, but cashless doesn't always work everywhere as yet. And we need to me, ease into it a little bit more, especially for the elderly and for the people, the less fortunate in our society. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Janssen. MP Peterson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't really have questions in the first round. I just wanted to make sure that my name is on the list in case of round two. I believe there has been enough discussed today, and I look forward to the answers from the Minister. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Peterson. Members of Parliament, Minister, our support staffs, I'm going to adjourn for 3 minutes as I make a change with the Vice Chair of Parliament. Every MP has spoken so far in this round, and I will add, where necessary, a few questions, and then we can adjourn this meeting. So I'll adjourn for 3 minutes right now until 4:45.
blessed afternoon. I hereby reopen this public meeting, and I will go over to giving the floor to MP Sarah Westcott-Williams. MP Westcott-Williams, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, Lady, thank you so much. To my colleagues, good afternoon. All tuned into this meeting, a good afternoon. And of course, to the Minister and her support staff. Minister, thank you for bringing this much anticipated piece of legislation to the Parliament of St. Martin. Minister, I want you, in taking account of my comments and questions, to have as the overarching phrase, social inclusive economics. It is a known economic phrase, not coined by me, and it has a specific meaning. In fact, in the elucidation to this law, the phrase social inclusive economics appears many times. Everyone, now I'm going to the draft law itself, everyone who wants, and I don't want to say who wants a bank account, I want to say everyone who wants to bank should be able to do so. In this draft law for a basic payment account, the introduction to the law, and during my introductory remarks, I referred to a draft proposal here in Parliament that came from former MP Bryson and registered here in Parliament under IS 551 of the parliamentary year 21-22. And there are some fundamental differences between that draft proposal that was presented to the government to forward to the Central Bank of Curaçao and St. Martin and the draft before us today. Just a few, but fundamental differences. One, in this draft, non-residents, so persons who are not registered residents of St. Martin, are included. If we look at the EU regulations, for example, they do include that you need to have some kind of registration in the country where you will be getting a bank account. And so I would like to know governments and the Central Bank of Curaçao and St. Martin position on this matter. In the proposal that was sent to government, it was suggested that legal entities who in the regular process of things cannot get a bank account should also fall under the basic payment account legislation. That is not the case in this draft law before us. And which makes me wonder even more, and I ask, why is in this draft law of ours reference made to the advice of the Council of Advice of Curaçao? And in how far are the laws in Curaçao, especially Curaçao, because we're in the same monetary union, but also Aruba, in how far are these laws different or the same? Because the amount of 3,000 guilders as a maximum in the proposal is based on the findings of Curaçao in terms of the earnings. That is why it is mentioned that the maximum of 3,000 guilders has been chosen. What are the exact findings in that context for St. Martin? It is mentioned that a majority of persons, and the percentage is even mentioned, of persons in Curaçao earn less than that amount per month. And that is why it is for Curaçao as well 3,000 guilders. Does the same argument apply to St. Martin? So again, another premise of the proposal that was submitted here in Parliament was that legal entities as well. If I look at the draft, not the draft, if I look at the law of Curaçao, for example, only certain legal entities are excluded from the right to a basic bank account. The gambling industry is excluded, and it is mentioned by the government. It was mentioned by the government of Curaçao when they submitted the draft law to Parliament that they will look at other ways to accommodate that sector. That is what the government of Curaçao said when they presented their law to Parliament. Minister, through you, Madam Chair Lady, I read a statement that the banks, especially those on Curaçao, they were the ones who had answered, did not see the need for a covenant, and they wanted the legislation to be in place. Okay, I can understand that. You regulated government that we must give a basic bank account. But what about the other understanding that government / the central bank should have with the local banks, such as the push in order to inform the population, to accommodate the population? What about those type of understandings? Wouldn't that be a good thing to have in a covenant? So that there must be a basic bank account possibility? Okay, fine. They wanted legislation. They preferred legislation. The legislation is here. But what about some of the other understandings and agreements with the local banking sector about this matter, and that be done in a covenant between government and these banks? For example, the awareness campaigns, consumer protection, that kind of information to the public. Would that not warrant a covenant, is my question. The government answered in their response to the final report that there are some other draft laws in the make. I acknowledge the Minister, Madam Chair Lady, referring to at least 2 of them, and I would like to know, in addition to what the minister mentioned, which of these laws can be considered falling under the caption of social economic inclusion? Why am I emphasizing this point? I get the impression, based on the direction of this draft law, that it has somehow a little shifted from the focus on the consumer, on the social inclusion, to the more compliance angle. So in order to make sure that we are complying with different legislations, different treaties, different international, whatever have you, I get a feeling that we have shifted. And so my question is, can the minister, based on this law, as well as on government's intention as expressed in the governing accord and program, identify some laws that really target social inclusion, education, financial and otherwise, the poverty situation on St. Martin? Are those things being taken into account? Because several of my colleagues referred to the fact that, is it that a majority of persons cannot get a banking account on St. Martin, or they don't want? 46% of persons responded to say they are not interested. They are not interested in a bank account. So the reason for these persons not having a bank account is not the often heard claim of the banks are not allowing us to have a bank account. Because when you really think about it, even with a maximum of 3,000 guilders, we want our, amongst others, not singling out any group, our welfare recipients to go not only get a bank account, have a bank account, but if at all possible, to go digital. imagine these persons, some of them collecting $300 and $250 they have to pay their apartment for. Are they really going to go through the process of getting it put on the bank and then to take and try to understand how digitally it could work, and maybe their landlord is not accepting it via the bank? You see, so what is the reality of St. Martin where social inclusion is concerned? What is our reality? I would like to know. And that is information that much of it should be had from the Central Bank of Curacao and St. Martin, in my opinion. The reference has been made in the elucidation to the Supreme Court ruling. It's referred to in the answer by the government in the nota naar aanleiding van het verslag that was prepared by the government. And so can the minister / the government put that or put the draft law before us in the context of that verdict or ruling by the Supreme Court. And then, Minister, I need to understand your thoughts about this, which was mentioned by a faction at the time in the Central Committee meeting, that an amendment would have come to include legal entities. And there must be a reason, which I would like to know, why in the case of St. Martin, it was not at all. I mentioned how Curacao has it regulated or is planning to further regulate it. You have Aruba. So why in the case of St. Martin? What I want to get at is whether it would have even made sense to come with an amendment to such a law that would include legal entities. That's the point I want to get at. In the answers from the government, of course, we have the complaint procedure explained for the basic payment account. How is this procedure when it comes to the regular consumer, the regular person making use of a bank account? You know, do we also have all of those steps where we can actually go and complain? One would recall the discussion with the central bank and persons complaining there, but they could not go there with their complaint. So how is that for just the regular consumer and their banking experiences, etc.? And then, again, through you, Madam Chair Lady, in the answer from the government to the questions and queries in the Central Committee, a lot has been said about the matter of the crib number, whether we can update it to a general identification number by whatever name. And so, can the minister explain through you, Madam Chair Lady, where are we today where that matter is concerned? Have we made any progress? What about the proposed campaign that the minister sort of endorsed, get a crib number? I questioned that and I received an answer. So any movement in that respect? What I see, Madam Chair Lady, and what I have deduced from the draft in front of us and the questions and the answers given is that there is a strong correlation between banking needs / banking desires and income. And that puts us right back to the topic of social inclusion. Are we really serving the public by only making it possible for them to have a bank account, is my question. The correlation between income and the need for a banking or banking needs, let me put it that way. Tied to that is my question. Is it procedures, thresholds cost, or is it something with our consumers in terms of their level of income, even the mentality towards, towards banking, etc.? As I mentioned earlier, 46% of those surveyed have no interest. It is, for them, it's not about the cost. Yeah, some people mentioned cost and some people mentioned other things, but 46% is not interested. What about those persons who are actually paid in cash? And it would be much easier for them to take $200 from the $600 that they receive to go pay whatsoever than actually work towards getting a bank account. And then, Madam Chair, to the Minister, through you, I took note, of course, as well, of the fact that when it comes to loans, 31% are actually, based on the survey, are actually mortgage payment. Is that something that the Minister thinks should be kept in the, I don't want to say the back of her head, Madam Chair Lady, maybe in the front of her head, so on the radar, that we should look at the payments of mortgage, and I'm now looking at a general tax system. Is 17% under or unbanked? Is it comparatively high? And when I say comparatively, I don't want to know, for example, that the next island is like 10 and the next one is 12. I want to compare the elements on St. Martin, such as our connection to the French side. That's the kind of I want to understand, given our economic reality, is the 17% comparatively high? I would like to know, through you, Madam Chair Lady, from the Minister via the Central Bank or via the Minister from the Central Bank, whether we can get a more in-depth analysis for St. Martin based on our specifics, based on our dual island administrations. And then, no foreign transactions are allowed. Several of my colleagues have looked at that matter from different angles. But do we support, endorse the foreign transactions that take place via non-banking financial institutions? Do we support that? Because that is where a majority of the foreign transfers, the remittances, are made. So how do we look at that? Do we want to encourage that cost is cut for the consumer? I asked about Curaçao's Council of Advice. Why is that in our elucidation? Are our laws exactly the same? What about information? It's also mentioned in there on the crypto market on St. Martin. Can we be provided any type of information, updates, statistics on that? What is the central bank's position today on that matter in terms of regulation or not? And then I read an interesting comment in the report. The payment systems of merchants, the so-called point of sale machines. And then it was sort of alluded to, could that be maybe tax evasion? I'm quoting from the report. And is there any way we can know how compliance is? Is there any way we can know how compliance is where that is concerned? What about the French and the Dutch tax systems and the payments? I have heard of payments here. So you go and you pay a machine that actually is a machine for a French bank here on St. Martin. Yeah, no, yes, can that be, should that be, and so when I say French, Dutch, those are the kind of things I would like to hear. I get back to my issue about tips on salaries, which are usually paid in cash. And I want to know if the minister has gotten anywhere with that matter. I mentioned the social inclusion economics, a broad topic, so I have narrowed it down to tax-related social inclusion economic measures. Bottom line question, is this legislation compliant and regulatory geared, or is it being to get more social inclusiveness? And put together with the TWO, the social inclusive economic projects be fast-tracked, is my opinion. Could these be identified and then fast-tracks? And then in conclusion, based on the social inclusive economics, poverty is a barrier to social economic inclusive economics. And I would like to know if in the responses from the minister, some attention could be paid to that fact. Madam Chair Lady, I thank you very much. Allow me on behalf, maybe taking a little bit from you there in the chair, but just to wish everybody a happy, I'm sure you're going to do it as well, but you know, given the beautiful gathering that the entire Parliament had earlier at the Festival Village, I just want to use that as an opportunity to wish everybody a happy and safe Carnival and say there's absolutely no need for aggression. We all can enjoy these days here on St. Martin, and I hope it is safe for everyone and a very happy one. I want to thank all the members of Parliament, staff, all the staff of Parliament, you know, for joining us today in basically Parliament saying Happy Carnival to each and every one. Madam Chair Lady, I really thank you for your indulgence. Thank you so much.
Thank you, MP Westcott Williams. Thank you, members of Parliament. Round 1 is now officially closed. The meeting will be adjourned in order to give the Minister of Finance time to prepare the answers. I also would like to acknowledge that one amendment was submitted by MP Arian and has also been forwarded to the government for answering. And indeed, so just to make that clear for the government's position on the amendment. And indeed, MP Westcott Williams was correct. I also would like to take the opportunity to wish the community of St. Martin a safe and violence-free carnival. Please drink responsibly. And if you cannot drink and drive, don't do it. Be focused. And I hereby do not drink and drive, just making it clear. Do not drink and drive, and let it be a festive remaining of the season. Hereby is the meeting adjourned.